Well, Halloween Horror Nights season has officially arrived at Universal Studios Hollywood for 2025, running select nights through November 2nd. This year's event features 8 all-new and returning mazes, Terror Tram, and more, and Horror Nights was again kind enough to invite me out for opening night to check out everything they've got in store for the coming season. Here are just some of the highlights. Terrifier was one of the most highly anticipated houses of 2025, with fans anxious about just how wet and just how smelly the house was going to be. The house did not disappoint and features some of Art the Clown's most infamous kills from the Terrifier franchise thus far. Get here early or plan accordingly because the standby line was as long as 3 hours during our visit, and in terms of how wet and how smelly, well, my experience was that of a light rain at best, and the smell was actually more tolerable than that of the Wyatt 6 house, which also has a smell factor.
You're not supposed to be. Okay, dude. How many times do I have to tell you? Don't freaking try to scare me when I'm on my break.
The Five Nights at Freddy's house was another highly anticipated house for 2025, based on the popular Blumhouse film inspired by the video game franchise. This house makes you feel like you're in a FNAF movie, and that's all thanks to Universal's partnership with the Jim Henson Creature Shop to recreate Freddy and his frightful friends from the film. Fallout was one of my most anticipated houses of 25 as a longtime fan of the game franchise and the Prime Video series. Because Fallout isn't horror and just has scary elements, I worried about the fear factor in this one, and unfortunately, my worries were actualized, but I'll give kudos to John Murdy and team for that power armor and that Yao Guai.
Best you try your luck behind that door.
Another highly anticipated house for 2025 is the Jason Universe house, and as a longtime fan of the Friday the 13th franchise, it did not disappoint. Celebrating 45 years of Jason Voorhees, the house has nods to films across the Friday the 13th franchise, with different iterations of Jason and some of his most iconic kills.
I tried to warn him. The place has a death.
You're doomed if you stay. Doomed. You're doomed if you stay here. Doomed! You're doomed if you stay
Another new house based on an IP this year is The Horrors of the Wyatt 6, featuring the WWE's Wyatt 6. Admittedly, I haven't watched wrestling since Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior teamed up in the early 90s, so much of this house was lost on me, but it was cool knowing that the house was a tribute to Bray Wyatt, who passed in 2023. I loved the backcountry aesthetic, but could have gone without the stank, which I swear I could still smell at various moments the next day. Rounding out this year's lineup of houses based on IPs is Poltergeist, inspired by the 1982 Tobe Hooper film. This isn't the first time Poltergeist has been at Horror Nights, as it was part of the 2018 Haunted House lineup. If you attended then and are short on time, I'd skip this one, as it's mostly the same experience with some refreshed lighting and set pieces. Another returning house for 2025 is the Horror Nights original house Scarecrow. The house, which originated at Universal Orlando Resort before making its way to Hollywood in 2022, returns with a refreshed soundtrack courtesy of longtime Horror Nights collaborator Slash. This is another instance where little has changed with the house aside from its soundtrack, so if you experienced it in 2022 and are light on time, you might be okay to skip this one. The final house for 2025 is Monstruos 3, The Ghost of Latin America. Monstruos 3 is the third and final house in a trilogy of original haunted houses inspired by Latin American folklore. This year's house features 3 spirits from Latin America with La Llorona, La Muelona, and La Ciguanaba. If you've followed me for a bit, you may recall that the original Monstruos was my favorite house of 2023, and while I enjoyed its sequel in 24, it felt flat, which had me, hopeful for this year's house. Thankfully, Murdy and team did not disappoint, and I think Monstruos 3 was a fine farewell to this series of houses. The only disappointing element, in my opinion, is it looks as though they did reuse some of the sets and scare elements from past iterations of Monstruos and La Llorona, but it's still worth checking out. To close this year's recap out, we're headed to Terror Tram with the return of Enter the Blumhouse, where this year Universal Studios is celebrating 15 years of Blumhouse. But before we get going, Megan has something to say.
We'll be underway in just a second, but before we depart, I need to go over some rules for your safety and comfort. Please remain seated at all times while the tram is in motion, keeping arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. Did you know 30% of accidental amputations can be attributed to people sticking their arms out of moving vehicles? Just a fun fact.
You can expect more Megan humor when you visit Terror Tram, as well as previews of some of Blumhouse's upcoming horror titles. This year's experience features returning favorites Megan, Happy Death Day, and The Purge, while integrating new elements from past haunted houses Insidious and The Exorcist Believer. Horror Nights also added a fresh sheet of snow to its Black Phone experience, inspired by the upcoming Black Phone 2.
The body in the blood. In the blood. The body in the blood. Body in the blood. The body in the blood. The body in the blood. The body in the blood.
Alright, meat sacks, let's get this party started. I've run the simulation 1,000 times and it always ends the same way. You die.